Sit. Good boy. Good boy. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. We are not in the mushroom dungeon today. We are outside in the backyard. It's a beautiful day in the middle of April, and it's a perfect day to start some shiitake logs. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I have just 5 red oak logs that I cut over the winter, and we're gonna inoculate them with some shiitake sawdust spawn. I'm gonna go through the whole process from start to finish, show you guys how I like to start my shiitake logs. Now, I'm only doing 5 today. It's a pretty small grow. It's a good number to start out with though. If you're just starting out, you've never done outdoor logs or shiitake logs before. I used to grow commercially with a friend, and we didn't have a huge outdoor log operation. We had maybe 200-300 shiitake logs going, and so we had a regular rotation going every week. We sold to restaurants, farm markets, that kind of thing. So this process I'm going to show you, you could scale this up to a few 100,000 logs, or just doing a few logs, big or as little as you want to go. So I have a bag of sawdust spawn here from Field & Forest Products. And this strain of shiitake is called WR46, and it's an awesome outdoor log strain. I highly recommend it if you're going to do outdoor logs. I believe it was Cornell University actually did a study with outdoor shiitake logs looking at speed of spawn run, overall yield, and this WR46 strain from Field & Forest Products came out on top by a lot. So it's a great strain. Field & Forest has a bunch of shiitake strains. They're an awesome company. They're a family-run company in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. I've worked with them for years. You guys have seen me grow strains from North Spore too. I love North Spore. There's 2 big players in the market. There's North Spore and Field & Forest. So they're both great, but Field & Forest, they are the OGs when it comes to shiitake log cultivation. They've done more than anybody else to help people learn how to grow shiitake outdoors on logs, from their awesome strains that they sell to figuring out which wood type works best. They just have a lot of great information on their website, so I encourage you to check them out. So we're going to be going with sawdust spawn today. You can also use wood plugs, like wood dowels. Those work great for doing logs outdoors as well. Shiitake, oyster, lion's mane, whatever. But I think sawdust spawn is the most cost-effective and easiest way to do these logs, and you also get a little faster spawn run with the sawdust spawn versus wood plugs. So we're going to be going with the sawdust spawn today. I have some special inoculators that I'm going to show you, but first of all we're going to start drilling our logs. So these red oak logs, they're about 40 inches long. That's a standard shiitake log. I would say 36 to 40 inches. I like to go 40. I cut these over the winter, and they've just been laying under the snow until it got warm out, and I was ready to inoculate them, and my spawn was ready and all that. So you want to cut your logs during the dormant season, when the trees are dormant, basically from leaf fall to bud swell in the spring. That's when you want to be cutting your logs. You don't want to cut them during the active growing season, because they release actually antifungal enzymes that are going to hurt your spawn run, your yield, all that stuff like that. You want to use healthy trees as well. You don't want to be using dead limbs that have fallen on the ground, have been laying there a while. They're not going to work at all or as well. So healthy trees or limbs cut during the dormant season is the way you want to go. Anywhere from, I would say, 36 to 40 inches long works well. Around 4 to 6 inches diameter, I would say. With the drill and plug method, you don't want to go huge on diameter. If you have really big diameter wood, you're probably better off going with the totem method. I have videos on that as well. I'll link them in the description. But for drilling and plugging, you want to go around 4 to 6 inch diameter. Shiitake, like the harder hardwoods, red oak, white oak, sugar maple, even beech works well. You don't want to use the real softer hardwoods like cottonwood or poplar. You want to save those for your oysters. So we have some beautiful red oak logs behind us here that are all ready to go. So let's get drilling. The first thing I recommend you consider getting is one of these angle grinder bits and attachments. These angle grinders spin super fast, so you can just jam out holes really fast with these things. So the bit is on the end there. It goes into the attachment, which just has a little Allen set screw that holds the bit in place, and then that attachment just threads onto your angle grinder. So that is an awesome option. They sell those at Field and Forest. They also sell them at other places online. Mycology suppliers, you can find those. The trick is you just have to match the diameter of your bit to the diameter of your inoculators. So these are thumb style inoculators. They sell these at Field and Forest Products, but they're also available at other mycology suppliers online. Basically, you tap this into your sawdust spawn, which packs it into the tube, and then you just push with your thumb, and that pushes the sawdust right into the hole that you just drilled. So these are the tools I recommend if you're going to go the sawdust spawn route. If you're going to go plugs, there's more options. You can just use standard wood bits, but the key is to match your bit to the size of your inoculators, because you want the diameter to be about the same. So I just have a 8-foot folding table set up out here. I just have a cheap tablecloth over everything, because we're going to be waxing over at this end, and I don't want to get wax all over my table. You could always scrape it off, but cheap tablecloth is nice to have. You can drill and plug and wax right on top of the table, but I made these handy dandy log holders a long time ago out of some rough cut hemlock I had kicking around, and they work really nice. So it's really simple design, just chunk of wood on the bottom, a couple chunks on the side with V's cut in them, and just screwed together. And these make great log holders. Some people get really fancy with them, and they'll put like a wheel here and a wheel here, and so you can actually roll the log on a couple wheels. A lot of different designs, and like most things, there's a ton of different ways to do this. I'm just showing you how I do it, and this works out pretty well. It's pretty efficient. So the other thing I have is this piece of angle aluminum. You could use a piece of wood, anything, but it's just a jig to line up your holes in your logs. And what we're going to do is we're going to do 8 rows of holes. So I'm going to start with 4 primary rows, which are going to have 9 holes in each row. And then I'm going to go back, and in between those, I'm going to do 8 holes in our secondary rows. So we're going to have 4 primary rows of 9, 4 secondary rows of 8, and we're trying to make like a crisscross or a diamond pattern in our logs. That helps with your spawn run. That's usually the pattern you want to go with. And for a log this size, you would want to do a minimum of 50 plugs, but because I have a ton of spawn and I'm only doing 5 logs, we're just going to send it. So I have, if you look at these blue lines on my jig, that actually ends up being 72 plugs per log. So we're going to do 68 total in our 4 primary and secondary rows, and then I'm going to do 2 plugs in each end. I prefer to put a couple plugs in each end of the log for a couple reasons. I think it helps speed up the spawn run a little bit. Also, your log ends are where you'll typically get other fungi infecting your shiitake logs. So sometimes you'll see turkey tail, especially, or false turkey tail, infecting the ends of your logs, and that's just going to compete with your shiitake mycelium, and we don't want that. So it seems like if I put a couple plugs in each end of the log, it helps with that. And then I'm just going to go through, and after I inject sawdust into every hole, we're going to seal each hole with wax. Now the other thing is, some people like to seal their entire log ends with wax. I don't do that. I just put a couple plugs in there and I seal the plugs, but I don't seal the entire log end. The reason I don't like to do that is because I like to force fruit my shiitake logs, which I'm going to talk about later. So basically, once your log is fully colonized, you can soak it in cold water for 12 to 24 hours, and that will induce a really heavy flush of shiitake. And by sealing your log ends, you're preventing some of that moisture in your soak from soaking up into your log. So I like to leave those ends partially open so they can absorb a bunch of water when I do those soaks for the force fruitings. Our primary rows are done. This isn't exact science, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to have that X or diamond pattern. So now we're going to go back in. We're going to do our secondary rows. So we have hole here, hole here. We're going to go right in the middle, middle, middle. Make that X shape pattern on our log. We're going to go through. We're going to do our 4 secondary rows.
You need protective eye gear.
So I broke my sawdust spawn all up. You definitely want to break your bag up. Otherwise, the spawn isn't going to go into your inoculator and it's going to make things more difficult. So make sure you break your spawn up really well. This bag, one of these 5.5 pound sawdust block bags, will do about 20 logs. I'm only doing 5 today, but we're doing more holes. As I mentioned, we're just going to jam the spawn into it. So I'm sure we'll have some left over. I'm going to cut the top off. So now we're going to take one of our inoculators and you're just going to tap it into the sawdust spawn. And that's going to pack your inoculator full of spawn. And we just come over to our log, center it over your hole, push in with your thumb. Once you get rolling, you can go pretty fast. Moving on to waxing, it's pretty important to get the wax on your logs relatively quickly. You don't want the spawn to dry out in your holes. What I'm using is just some blocks of cheese wax that I've melted in a double boiler. Lots of different kinds of wax will work. You can use soy wax, cheese wax, just a paraffin like golf canning wax that you can find in the canning section of your grocery stores. That'll work fine too. But you want to be careful with wax because when you're heating it, it can flash ignite if you get it too hot. Obviously, we don't want that. So the best way to do it is a double boiler setup. I just have a stainless bowl on top of a stainless pot on a side burner, and I got water down in the pot, and we drop our wax in the bowl on top. Just get the double boiler thing going, and you can see our wax is nice and liquefied and ready to be applied to our logs. So the best way I've found to apply your wax is one of these little foam trim rollers. You can get these at any hardware store, big box store, whatever. It's just a little paint roller. It's like a synthetic dense foam. Works really great for dabbing wax onto your inoculation points. So I like to use these. They're cheap, they're effective. You can use these for a whole day of inoculation and then just toss them at the end of the day because they're going to be totally loaded with hardened wax. But they sell all kinds of little tools online for applying wax to your logs, but I've found these to be just as effective. So you can move pretty quickly with your wax as well. You can do a few holes at a time before it starts to cool off and you got to go back to your wax again. You don't need a lot, but that wax is going to keep your spawn in your hole where it belongs, and it's also going to keep it from drying out. It's really important to keep that spawn from drying out so it can fully colonize your logs. So if you can bribe or blackmail somebody into helping you with your shiitakeulation, it's going to help you out a lot. You can get a nice workflow going, one person drilling, filling, one person waxing. I'm doing this by myself right now, but if you can bribe or blackmail someone, I mean, I'm simple. Usually pizza and beer works for me. It's going to help you out, help you get your logs done a lot faster. But I'm just going solo right now, so I'm going to wax this log up and then I'm going to go back and drill my others. I was able to find a volunteer to help me with my waxing. Thank you, sir. He's got the technique down. Nice job, nice job. All right, final step in the process here, guys. We got our logs stacked for incubation. And spawn run with shiitake logs is typically 6 to 12 months. Because we inoculated really heavy, put a ton of plugs in these logs, I'm hoping maybe by this fall they'll be ready to produce some mushrooms. Maybe we'll even try and force fruit them if we get some time this fall. I will cover the whole force fruiting process later when we get to that point in another video, but I'm just gonna leave them here to incubate. So we're on the north side of my house, so this barely gets any sun here, so it's a nice shady spot out of the wind. And this is a flower bed. These are actually all snowball hydrangeas. It's just early in the spring, they haven't started growing yet, but these will get around 4 feet high, give us some nice shade and windbreak there too for our logs. I will tell you that most people's outdoor log grows, if they fail, 99% of the time they fail because their logs get too dry. If your moisture content in your wood drops to a certain percentage, they just will not yield well. They will not produce mushrooms for you. So you want a nice shady spot out of the wind. You never want them sitting right in water. You don't want them in standing water, but you do want to keep them moist. So how I have them stacked here is perfect. I have these window wells on the back of my house, and I just have the one end of the log raised up a little bit on the window well, and the other side is sitting right on the soil. So being close to the ground will help them maintain moisture. And I'm just going to water these just as I would a garden. So if you get some dry weather, hit them with water, every couple days. Just, you don't have to really soak them, just enough to get them wet, and that'll help hold that moisture. If you start to see cracking in the ends of your logs, that's a good indicator that your logs are getting too dry, so you want to increase watering. So just keep watering them, guys. Don't let your logs get too dry, and hopefully by fall we'll be able to get some shiitakes out of these. If you haven't had a chance to check out my Patreon page yet, check that out. I have some really cool perks, a couple different tiers there. I actually have a Discord server where I help people on a more personal basis with their grow. Monitor that every day. You can post pictures, tell me what's going on, and I can help you with your grows. So if you haven't had a chance, check out my Patreon page. Hit me up in comments, and I will catch you next video.